Good evening, everyone. This is Danny Hai Fong. Happy Friday. Uh, Happy April Fool's Day. I would like to just let you know that this is my last stream. I am retiring. This is just not for me anymore. I have to go on and move on to other endeavors. And so I just want to take this time before I get into the content to say goodbye. So I appreciate all of your support. I really do. People like AOC, right? These politicians, the Democrats, they're just too much for me. Imperialism is just too challenging. It's too omnipotent. I think I just got to throw up my hands and go on and live my day to day life because I don't really see any possibility for change, right? I mean, how hopeless is the situation? The United States is a declining empire. I just got to live my life and, hopefully I'll make enough money to live and then die. And that is an existence that I think is fit enough for me. So I just want to say goodbye before I even get started and we can just get to the content. So the first thing I want to talk about, April Fools, April Fools, April Fools. This is not my last stream. That's ridiculous. All those things I said, I didn't even know really where that was coming from. I was just trying to, I guess, channel the inner dark part of myself. But good evening, everyone. It's Friday, April Fool's Day. Uh, I wanted to just give you some breaking news that this would be my last stream, but of course, I was just fooling. So it's good to be with all of you this evening. I hope you are all well. Please do like the stream. You can just see it right here. All the things you can do to help support this channel, to help support my work overall. I will say one thing that isn't April Fools is that it is tax season. And for us independent journalists and media folks, let's just say that the IRS does not look at this kind of work very, very nicely, right? So they do take their cut. So I just want to say that if you are able to support this channel, you can do so right here. All the things you are able to do to help out, help spread the work, help boost this stream, and how to support my work so that it is more sustainable. It is all right here. I'm just going to keep this up for a little while. So I have a lot of things I want to get to. So let me just do that. There's so much happening, and I was going to take the night off. My wife is out. I was like, I'm just going to take the night off. But then everything started happening, right? It just seemed like there was just development after development. There was, for example, the Amazon union election, right? The Amazon labor union led by Chris Smalls. They just had a massive victory through winning the election, the NLRB sponsored, mandated election by a pretty big margin. And they have essentially established at least the legitimacy of the union, the recognition of the union. But I will get more into that because there's a lot to union elections and there's a lot to labor law. There's a lot to unionization that is very challenging. So I'm going to get to that in the last part of this segment. The first topic I'm going to discuss, though, is I'm writing an article about this as well, as Joe Biden's declining approval rating and what this all means. So I have three topics I want to talk about. I'm going to first get into that. Joe Biden's declining approval rating. What does it mean? Why is it happening? What is this latest poll from NBC News saying? And how should we look at this and how should we move forward? Then there is today breaking news that the United States, through the Treasury Department, has leveled more sanctions on entities in the DPRK, likely state-owned corporations, in order to squeeze North Korea, the DPRK, even more in response to, as they always say, in response to the DPRK's military drills. They just launched an intercontinental ballistic missile that supposedly has the ability to reach the United States. And so in response to that, the Treasury Department is saying that there needs to be even more sanctions on the DPRK. So I'm going to get into, well, what have been the impact of sanctions on the DPRK up until this point? What is the history and the context that we need to know about the DPRK in the United States? Who is really the aggressor here? Is it the DPRK or is it the United States? I think we know the answer to that, but I'm going to get into even just in over the last year, how the United States has actually been escalating the situation on the Korean Peninsula to really provoke the DPRK to continue onward in building and developing up its defenses, regardless of whatever economic impact the sanctions may have. Really, the sanctions are an inevitable outcome of a regime change operation that the United States continues to wage and has been waging for decades upon decades, beginning with the invasion of Korea. And so we're going to get a little bit into that history as well. Then we're going to end with, of course, the Amazon union workers, the Amazon labor union, the workers that are organizing that union. And I'm going to review the exchange that AOC had with journalist Jordan Chariton. I really do like his journalist. I know we don't always see eye to eye on all issues, but I do respect the hard work that he puts in. You have to really salute that. So I'm going to go over the exchange that he had, as well as Crystal Ball had with AOC around this unionization campaign. So we're going to get into those three topics tonight, and I will be with you probably until around 8:15 p.m. Eastern time, meaning that we'll probably be on for an hour and 20 minutes. So while you're here, of course, do everything that you see here in this comment that I've shown. You can like, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications bell, and you can support the work by becoming a subscriber on Patreon. The link is there. The link is in the description. At whatever amount you can give, it really does help sustain this work here in helping me manage this channel, as well as all of the articles that I am publishing, usually once weekly. I'm now hosting a weekly podcast as well in the Callin app. So there's a lot of things happening. I'm co-editing Friends of Socialist China. We just had a great event on Latin America. If you've been able to see that live, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have not, then you can just go to the YouTube channel, Friends of Socialist China, and view that. Dilma's speech was incredible. Ben Norton, Camila Escalante. We had the ambassador to China of Cuba from Cuba speak, Carlos Pereira. We had the Chinese ambassador to Cuba, Ma Hui. I mean, it was an incredible event. So go check that out, Friends of Socialist China. It's one of the projects that I helped co-edit. So with that said, though, I'm going to get started. So keep liking the stream and keep doing everything that you see here on the comments shown. Okay. So the first story is Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is in trouble. Okay. So Joe Biden is now really pretty far into the second year, right? We're reaching the middle point of Joe Biden's administration. Joe Biden has been presiding over a pretty stagnant political situation in the United States, right? COVID-19 has continued to rage. We've had economic crisis really continue in a lot of ways, mainly through inflation now, although as you all may know, measures such as unemployment in the United States are very, very, very limited. They actually don't tell us much and they actually obscure more than they tell us. So usually unemployment is a lot higher than what is being reported. We already know that a lot of the income losses, a lot of the losses of wealth really do affect the lowest 90% of all earners. And so working people are having a really difficult time right now in the United States. And that has been the story of the Joe Biden administration since he came in promising to build back better and to restore the soul of the nation and to really do the opposite of what Donald Trump has did during his administration. We've pretty much seen Joe Biden continue Trump's policies, add on to policies that Trump put forward both on the domestic and foreign policy scene. And we've also seen him do new things, right? We've seen him escalate in ways that Donald Trump couldn't imagine in some areas, especially in foreign policy. And that's what we're seeing, I think, now, right? We're seeing Joe Biden really play the role of the hawk that he always has been, right? Imagine if Donald Trump, right, was here getting rid of asylum, limited asylum policies like he did today. Joe Biden got rid of that for people crossing the US Mexico border, right? There was a COVID restriction that allowed people to get asylum a little bit quicker who are crossing the border. Now that's gone. We know about the deportations. We know about how the detentions have grown, the ICE raids have grown. We know that the militarization of the police has grown, that Joe Biden has been all about funding the police, right? Funding the police more. It doesn't matter what his constituents say, right? People want universal health care. They want student debt relief, and Joe Biden hasn't provided any of it. And Joe Biden won't even fight for the Build Back Better policy. He will not oppose. He will not stand up to Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and all these so-called moderate Democrats, of which he is one, in order to get things done that would literally save his administration. So, what has happened? Well, we've seen consecutive months of Joe Biden's approval rating plummeting. I've covered this story even just 6 weeks ago, right? In the month of March, in late February, we saw Joe Biden's approval rating, I think, was somewhere around hovering around 44, 43%. And that was just a further decline from what was the case in April 2021, where it was over 50%. So now it's even worse. A new NBC News poll shows us that his situation is even worse, despite all of his efforts to escalate things with Russia, to intimidate Russia, to really come out looking like some kind of bully and the good guy in this situation, right? He's trying to promote the United States as this arbiter of democracy. And we've seen the exact opposite of that. We've seen Joe Biden pump Ukraine with weapons, sanction Russia to the detriment of the entire global capitalist economy. Prices are rising everywhere, and they already were, but now with energy prices, it is going through the roof. The EU is scrambling. They don't know what to do. They're even trying to saber rattle with China now while they're in this EU China summit. It is a disaster. And the economic situation is very unstable, and it is already hurting working people. And so people who were polled in this NBC News poll that I'm going to pull up now are telling Joe Biden that they do not approve of what is happening here at all, that they are very angry with their current situation. And they have a lot of reasons to be angry. And so here is the story. Biden's job approval falls to the lowest level of his presidency amid war and inflation fears. 7 in 10 Americans express low confidence in the president's ability to deal with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as his approval fell to 40% in a new NBC News poll. So, this is during the nation's largest inflation spike in 40 years. Let me make this bigger for you all, actually. Overwhelming majorities say they believe the country is headed in the wrong direction and disapproved of the president's handling of the economy. Those are some of the major findings of this new national NBC News poll, which found that Biden's overall job approval rating had declined to just 40%, the lowest level of his presidency. They also found that Republicans enjoyed a 2-point lead in answering which party should control Congress ahead of November's midterm elections. So that's huge trouble. Okay. So this poll was conducted March 18th to the 22nd, before the president's overseas trips, where he met with NATO allies. He gave that speech in Poland where he said we can't have Putin in power, right? So it came before that, but it's unclear how that would actually change things. It might change things a bit, but this is still monumental. 80% of Americans say they agree with Biden's decision to ban Russian oil imports, even if it means higher gas prices. So there are some things here, as they say, silver linings, they say. And I think what this indicates is more that the electorate is already very conservative, and they already are kind of in the bag for war, right? A lot of these are Republican and Democratic Party voters, very loyal, partisan voters, those who do not really eschew the establishment line on any issue. So the fact that his polling numbers have some of these silver linings should not come as a surprise. It just shows a bit of a confusion. But The big issue here for Biden is this graph, okay? So Biden's job ratings has fallen to a new low. Do you approve or disapprove of how Biden is doing as president? Look at April 2021. 53% said they approved of him, 39% said they disapproved. Now it's almost reversed. 40% approve, 55% disapprove. So in a span of a year, Joe Biden has essentially pummeled and plummeted his stock with the electorate, the voting public. And that's a huge deal because these are the people who do determine elections in a lot of ways. Well, we know that the rigging of the election system actually determines elections. But in terms of those who vote and give legitimacy to the system, it's these kind of people who are really determining the elections, not the working people who are already disaffected or already pushed out of the voting system. So let's keep reviewing this, okay? So the erosion in Biden's approval rating has been across the board among key demographic groups, including Black respondents from 64% approve in January to just 62% now. So it would be a 2% decline with Black voters. That's a huge decline. Women, 51% approve to now 44%. Latinos, 48% to 39%, and then independents, 36% to 32%, already a low numbers. So the GOP pollster, so this is the Republicans, we have to, of course, put a little bit of an asterisk here, but they're saying that you cannot get down to the low 40s in presidential approval unless you have strained your own base. And we saw Donald Trump had done that to a degree late in his first term. Late in his first term, he was having some struggles as well. So here's handling on the issues, okay? And when we look at this is important, okay? And let me just, okay. So this is important. So this is dividing up between the COVID-19, the economy, and foreign policy. And so with COVID-19, he has declined in some ways, but actually improved from the last poll from earlier this year, January. So he's actually had a 7% spike in the handling of COVID-19. Not really sure what that means, but given that things have opened up a bit, life, I think, is a little more, a bit, quote unquote, normal. There's just a little less regard for COVID-19. Not something that I necessarily agree with 100%. But a lot of people are just sick and tired of the restrictions. And so we have to actually acknowledge that reality, whether we agree with all of it or not. So he's received a boost there. But the economy, this is actually what will probably determine the 2022 midterm elections and then 2024. And this is where the disaster is for him. Foreign policy, I think, is its own disaster, and I'll get into that. But look at this. Every single poll since April has seen a marked decline, 5% between April 2021 to August of 2021, just 40% approval in October 2021, 38% approval of Joe Biden's economic policies in January 2022, and now just 33%. So just 33% believe Joe Biden is doing a good job with the economy. That is huge. That means that a lot of people are unhappy about where they are economically. And why should they be happy? Wages have stagnated, debt continues to mount, rent prices are going through the roof, gas prices through the roof, the risk of homelessness is at an all-time high, child poverty went up by 6 to 8 million people just because the Biden administration allowed the child tax credit to expire. A lot of the COVID-19 pandemic support, whether it's extended unemployment, etc., those policies are gone. There really isn't much to hang your head on. They're saying there are more jobs out there, but these jobs are shit jobs. They are bullshit jobs. They are low-wage jobs. They are not paying the bills. People are feeling the heat, and they are telling Joe Biden they're feeling the heat. And then foreign policy, there's a little bit of an uptick from January 2022 to March 2022, but with some caveats there, okay? So to the cost of living issue, I found this very interesting. 62% of respondents said their family incomes are falling behind the cost of living. 62% of respondents in this poll said that their family incomes are falling behind the cost of living. These are people who are die-hard Republicans and Democrats. These are not the poorest people. These are not those who are on the margins, who are excluded from the electoral system. This means that even people within a certain political and economic milieu are feeling the heat. And so that is not good news for Joe Biden. That is not good news for Joe Biden. This is very, very bad news for Joe Biden, that this poll is indicating that people are struggling this much. It means that he is likely, and the Democrats are likely, to lose a chunk of their base and lose enthusiasm, which I think is a given, right? So these are just how the polling numbers in a graph. So I'll just skip that. But we can get in. I don't really want to get in who's to blame for inflation. President Biden is shown to be blamed in this poll for inflation. And of course, because he's the face of the United States, he's the commander in chief, and he's the one who's talking about recovery, 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 and the opposite is true. So this is what I want to talk to you all about as well. Concerns about the war in Ukraine. So there's some interesting data points here that I think we have to take seriously. First is that there are people who are worried about the US's role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So 83% said they're concerned that the war is increasing the cost of goods like gasoline. That's just a given. Of course, people are going to be unhappy that right as the news is talking daily all the time about how Russia is intervening in Ukraine and the United States has XYZ sanctions on Ukraine, and then that is leading to this spike in the cost of living, of course, there's going to be worry about that. Then there's the 82% who said they're concerned that the war will involve nuclear weapons. Now, that is a huge concern. That means 82% of people in this poll believe that this could be a nuclear conflict or already really is one. And the reason for that, I do not believe the reason for that is because people are worried that the United States is going to use nuclear weapons. So I don't think this is some kind of anti-interventionist political position. I do happen to think I do therapy on the side, and I have clients who say that they're worried that Russia is going to use nuclear weapons against the United States, and that's because of the report that happened earlier this March during the beginning phases of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where Russia put its deterrent forces on high alert in its nuclear weapons program. That news led people who follow polls, who do polls, who watch mainstream media. They begin to have concerns about Russia and Russia's possibility of using nuclear weapons against the United States. But an important thing here, though, is that even if the anxiety isn't where we want it to be, right? Because I think that's not the case. That's not reality. I do not think that Russia is going to use nuclear weapons or ever would use nuclear weapons, even though it has the most in the world, against the United States. That would be mutually assured destruction and really quite foolish. But the fact that people have that much anxiety will also cause people to be dissatisfied with Joe Biden's performance, because on the one hand, you have people who genuinely do not want, and most people genuinely don't want, right? 74% said they're concerned the US will send combat troops to fight in Ukraine. People don't want that. So there are people who are genuinely concerned that that announcement by Russia at that time would send the United States into Ukraine for some kind of final solution or something, some escalation of the conflict. But then you see that people are actually concerned about combat troops in Ukraine because people don't want to see that. They don't want to see a direct intervention. They don't want to see a World War III, even if their politics are anti-Russia because of all the propaganda. So that anxiety, that war anxiety and fatigue could really hurt Joe Biden, because really Joe Biden ends up being in a place where he cannot win. So the anti-Russia propaganda means that people are a little bit more primed to want to see aggressive measures, but they're also in this double bind. These aggressive measures puts their anxiety on high, but they're not willing to say we just need peace. So Joe Biden can't say we need peace because he'll look weak on Russia, but also he can't do what would be really the destructive and foolish thing to do, which is to escalate this thing even further, because of the limitations of the United States, what that would even further do to the economy, what that would do to the global situation. The United States isn't prepared for that. It isn't built for that. So, in effect, he's in trouble. He doesn't really have anywhere he can go. And that will lead people to then look at him as weak, incompetent. There's just so many ways to look at Joe Biden right now and how he's positioned the United States on the Russia Ukraine conflict, which is just counterproductive for him. The only way, right, and this would never happen, but the only way that the United States could come out of this looking strong and maybe garnering some modicum of popularity, maybe isolating the most hawkish and conservative elements, would be just to lead negotiations and lead a peace agreement and give some concessions to Russia and allow Russia to give some concessions to Ukraine and come to some kind of at least forestalled, ceasefire, some kind of ceasefire that would help boost the Democrats' image and public relations image going to the midterms and then to 2024. But they're not going to do that because that would look soft on Russia and that would anger the Pentagon. And it's unclear whether those negotiations would bear fruit anyway, given how there are so many forces in the military industrial complex who want to see the opposite. So really, there is not a lot of confidence in Joe Biden in managing the Ukraine crisis, 44%. So people are not happy about this. They're not happy about what's going on. And this is a huge turning point, I think. Okay. So I'm just going to end this because there's not really much else to say about this poll. It's just bad across the board. But you see how people don't have confidence. They're worried about the US's role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. They're very unhappy about the economic situation, and it's hurting Joe Biden in the polls in this critical moment where Joe Biden, if his administration is going to see a second term, if that's what Joe Biden wants, unclear. But if that's ultimately the goal for a second term, the midterms are not looking good. This poll has already shown that we're just months away from the midterm elections and the Democrats are declining in popularity. The Russia-Ukraine conflict isn't helping, which I think Joe Biden miscalculated, the administration miscalculated as being something, a strategy, a flashpoint worth investing in, worth really escalating, because they believed that if they could look strong on Russia, if they could weaken Russia, right, after its entrance into Ukraine for this military operation, then that would boost the stock of Joe Biden. And in some ways, in some areas, it did, right? Especially very early on. But now, as time has gone on and this conflict has really dragged on and doesn't look like it's going to come to a resolution soon, or at least a resolution that has real teeth. There's some talks about possibly a peace deal on the way, but every time that happens, it seems like something gets in the way. Of course, there's the ongoing propaganda war that is constantly getting in the way. But nonetheless, Joe Biden is in trouble, and that's because the Biden administration is right. And this is the analysis part of this, is that the Joe Biden administration is a placeholder presidency. It is a presidency that reflects, it is an administration that reflects almost as perfect as you can get the decline of the United States. And I'm going to be doing an article on this published probably tomorrow, I hope. It's a short article just talking about how Joe Biden can't slap his way out of, to use the reference to Will Smith's Oscar debacle, he can't slap his way out of this legitimacy crisis that he tried to with Russia. He tried to slap around Russia. I mean, if we want a metaphor, that's a metaphor. Joe Biden tried, his administration tried to slap around Russia. Sanctions, right? Escalate militarily, pump Ukraine with weapons, try to elevate Zelensky's status, right? Allow these foreign mercenaries to go into Ukraine. He's tried to tip the scales and it just hasn't worked. And it's not going to work because working people are fed up and they have been for a very long time. That's what allowed Donald Trump to win in 2016 in the first place, right? It's this mass disillusionment that we're seeing from working people. And Joe Biden is only further cementing that. He's a poor celebrity because presidents have to be celebrities. So Donald Trump could do that. He's a celebrity president. He was a celebrity president, right? Barack Obama had a huge element of celebrity to him. He had a lot of talent, a lot of capacity to manipulate and fool people, to put blinders over their eyes, to make tepid promises or even just manipulative kind of statements that made people believe in him. Joe Biden has none of that. Joe Biden can't do that. Joe Biden can't even get out to the podium during the beginning, right? In February, late February, when Russia had announced its special military operation. Joe Biden gave I think it was something like a 15-minute speech in response. He made people wait for 40 minutes before he went out to the podium. This is the kind of person that Joe Biden is. His confidence is very low, right? His confidence is very low. He does not have this kind of confidence that reflects the rhetoric that he uses in his speeches. He doesn't look like a strong, quote unquote, Democratic president. No, he does not look like that. His foreign policy and his domestic policy looks like rot. It looks like decline because it is, right? Imperialism is on the decline, and he is caught in between the reality of his history, who he really serves, the imperialists, the very moment that we're in, this crisis, COVID-19 pandemic, economic crisis. Now we have this historic war happening between Russia and Ukraine over NATO expansion and these huge questions of imperialism happening right now, a hot war happening right now that is placing Joe Biden's administration on blast, putting it on blast. And because Joe Biden is just a loyal servant to the elite, and because this moment calls for massive social transformation, Joe Biden cannot help but stay right in the middle, not really doing a damn thing other than, right? Because what did Howard Zinn say? You can't be neutral on a moving train. So, of course, the default is Joe Biden hearkens to his history. Joe Biden serves who he's loyal to. And so, yes, we don't get Build Back Better. We don't get healthcare. We don't get jobs. What we get is promises of police funding, an $800 billion military budget, inflation, food shortages, right? And we also get the threat of nuclear war, not because Russia is going to use one on the United States, but because the United States is pumping Ukraine with weapons, refusing to be a good faith negotiator in this conflict, uh, really escalating things, posing with Nazi forces, neo-Nazi forces all across the media, training these forces, sending officers to train these forces over the last several years, and of course, staging the coup, which Biden was a big part of under the Obama administration in 2014. I mean, his fucking son, Hunter Biden, had a damn job at Burisma Corporation, right? Making what, $50,000 a month, $80,000 a month on the so-called board of that corporation. And that's because he was given special privileges after the US staged a coup d'etat there. So that should tell us all we need to know about Joe Biden, where he's at. I call him a placeholder president because he absolutely can do nothing but serve the interests of the ruling class, the imperialists who he has always served in this moment of crisis, because that is what is demanded of him. Right now, you don't have really many movements demanding anything of Joe Biden, right? A lot of the movements that try to push forward Bernie Sanders, Black Lives Matter, a lot of those have retreated in many important ways, and a lot of that is because we have a Democrat in the White House. Not everyone has retreated, but a lot of people have retreated to the point where people are not really challenging Joe Biden. And so what we have is just a lot of unhappy people and the possibility for another shift politically to occur. Doesn't mean much is going to change, right? Of course, whenever there's a shift, it does mean some things change. It does mean things become either more reactionary or not. But the general trend is a bipartisan trend of endless war and endless austerity. Joe Biden is here to serve both, and that is his role. He's proudly saying this. I mean, this is the problem with Joe Biden. And I said before, he's not a good actor, he's not a good celebrity. He does not have the skills, the capacity, or the competence to pull off what Obama could pull off, and even Donald Trump with his followers could pull off. Donald Trump could really throw racist red meat and throw all kinds of things out to the public. He could criticize the media. He could put on this populist kind of image, and that would get his followers and to be more enthusiastic for him. And that helped him. That honestly was what kept him politically viable for as long as he was, from the campaign into the presidency. And then he lost because of blunders of officialdom, honestly, like blunders that could have been avoided. And Joe Biden really, even though he won in the final analysis handedly, he didn't just win by like these thin hairs. He did win pretty handedly. But if Donald Trump had just done a few things different, right, he probably would have been president. It wouldn't have been that difficult. And that's the crisis of confidence, the crisis of legitimacy that the United States is in. You have someone like Joe Biden who's supposed to represent the best that the United States has, and really he's the best that imperialism has. And it isn't very good, because imperialism is not in good shape. The United States is not in good shape, and it is on this trend of decline. It is in this ongoing, slow rolling, but really rapidly escalating crisis. And it doesn't have any solutions to the contradictions that it has itself produced, right? Economically, militarily, socially, all of it. Doesn't have any solutions anymore. So it's up to us to really be the ones to build the next kind of phase for humanity, and how that will take shape in the United States in particular, as we try to build a global movement for peace, for justice, for socialism, etc. So that's Joe Biden. That is Joe Biden's low approval ratings. That's what you need to know about it. You need to know that Joe Biden can't help but continue on this path toward decline, because the United States is on this very trajectory, and Biden just happens to be the perfect expression of this. And he is no more uh, sort of an actor that can independently change things than any other president. But at the same time, theoretically, there's some small tweaks that he could have easily made to avoid this legitimacy crisis, at least temporarily. But imperialism demands, and of course, his loyalties demand, that he does not do any of it, whether it's just simple negotiations over the Russia-Ukraine conflict, really basic policies to help relieve the pain of working people. These are not very difficult, but he won't do them, right? Build Back Better, it's dead. No one's talking about it. It's dead. So that's Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden's low polling numbers. So amid this decline in popularity, right, Joe Biden has tried to escalate the situation in Ukraine, of course, but something happened today, okay? And as I transition, please do look at this comment here below. Look at that and see that there are so many things you could do to support this work: by liking, by sharing, by subscribing to the channel. So share the stream. You can like this video, and you can support the work by becoming a subscriber. That is what helps sustain this work, and is greatly appreciated as I move forward in covering some things that people don't cover. And one of those things is Korea, the DPRK. So I want to get into this, okay? I want to spend some good time on this. The DPRK has another set of sanctions leveled upon it by the United States, and the Joe Biden administration announced them today through the Treasury Department, that new entities in the DPRK are going to be sanctioned in response to these so-called missile launches that have been happening over the past several months, as recently as this week, through these intercontinental ballistic missiles that the DPRK has been developing. So Reuters reported that the United States on Friday, which is today, slapped sanctions on 5 entities it accused of providing support to North Korea's development of weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles programs, increasing pressure on Pyongyang following a recent series of missile launches. The Department of Treasury, the Treasury Department, in a statement said Friday's actions targets the Ministry of Rocket Industry, which it said is a North Korean weapons of mass destruction research and development organization directly linked to the development of the ICBMs. It is also designated 4 of the organization's subsidiaries. So, of course, right, these look like just economic entities, just corporations, right? the Hapjeongang Trading Corporation, the Korea Ronsan Trading Corporation, the Sunghaesan Trading Corporation, and the Uncheon Trading Corporation. So, of course, economically, this is meant to bring the pain to the DPRK. So it follows a rise of tensions in North Korea following two ballistic missile tests, February 26th and March 4th. That involved a new ICBM system. Okay, so March 4th, that involved a new ICBM system that North Korea is developing. The last week's first full ICBM test conducted in North Korea since 2017. So basically, Janet Yellen is just saying that it's provocative, a clear threat to stability, blah, blah, blah. The United States is committed to using our sanctions authorities to respond to the DPRK's continued development of weapons of mass destruction, right? WMDs again, guys. We're back to WMDs. How very predictable. So here we go. Nuclear weapons, right? Reuters is just peddling the intelligence line. And what we're seeing, of course, is the United States increasing its aggression on the DPRK. This is nothing new. And oftentimes, as you saw in that article, the DPRK is presented as the aggressor. It is the DPRK that is building these weapons, and they're just doing these missile tests for no reason, right? They're only doing it to be provocative, and the United States has to come to the rescue of South Korea and the rest of the world to address this, right? The United States is the arbiter here. They have to address this. But you have to ask, why exactly would the DPRK be so concerned, right? Why would they be so concerned about developing these missile systems? Well, contrary to popular opinion in the United States and the West, the US presence in South Korea is enormous, and there is a lot of provocative exercises, a lot of provocative events, militarization happening right along the DMZ, right below the artificial border put into place during the Korean War, the massively bloody Korean War, which I will get to in a second. So even just last year, late last year, November 2021, Joe Biden with South Korea, the US and South Korea, began joint exercises, right? Amid attempts to reignite North Korea talks. So under Donald Trump, there were talks about denuclearization. Seemed like things were kind of progressing, and then they were forestalled. I believe after the first meeting, there was such a campaign. Pelosi, the entire media came after Donald Trump, completely sabotaged those talks. But here you have, in November 2021, a joint aerial drill that was happening between the United States and South Korea. That seems pretty provocative. A 5-day-long annual exercise, the two allies mobilized about 100 air assets, including F-15K and KF-16 jets from South Korea and F-16s from the United States, reported Yonhap News Agency on Monday. So previously called Vigilant Ace, this drill used to mobilize tens of thousands of troops along with cutting-edge fighter jets, but it has been scaled back since 2017 to facilitate peace efforts. So they carried out the drill in a low-key manner, and the South Korean Air Force declined to elaborate on the maneuvers. And then, of course, North Korea has long criticized this, and they say it's all in response to ballistic missiles. So it's always right that the DPRK is the reason why these missile drills are happening, or why these military drills are happening, these exercises on the border. So there you have just an example, right, of just recently, in the last 6 months, the United States conducting a military exercise in South Korea and then saying that it's because the DPRK is aggressive and bigoted and a threat to democracy and all of this. But the DPRK has a lot of reason to believe that it needs to be militarized, that it needs to have a strong, centralized defense system. And I'm just going to go over a few things. So even in Reuters, right, here's a little fact box about the security arrangement. So this was written in 2021, just a year ago. Okay. So there's been a 70-year security alliance, they say. All right. And that goes back, of course, to the invasion of Korea that I will get into. But I'm not even going to get into this history because it's not a good history. But I want to just get into, right? And here's all the deals, right? They talk about all these security deals. South Korea agreed to increase its military budget 8.2% in 2019 to 921.5 million. And for a small country, that's a huge military budget. And the United States is pressuring that. So Donald Trump wanted them to increase even more than that. But here you go. There are 28,500 American troops in South Korea. It's the United States' third largest military presence outside of the country after Japan and Germany. And so the U.S. forces of Korea operate 90 combat planes, 40 attack helicopters, 50 tanks, and some 60 patriotic missile launchers in South Korea. And so here's how big South Korea's army is, 19,500 soldiers. So you have more U.S. troops there than there are even soldiers in the South Korean army. The Republic of Korea, I should say, because South Korea kind of legitimizes the regime. And I don't think that there is any legitimate Korean government other than one Korea. And I am of the belief that the DPRK represents a liberation struggle, making it actually the most legitimate form of government that exists on the peninsula. That's my opinion. People may think that that is too radical or revolutionary, but that's just the truth. So there you go. Okay. There are 28,000 American troops, U.S. troops in the Republic of Korea, and they are pushing further militarization and increase in South Korea's, the Republic of Korea's military budget. That is very notable. That is very dangerous, and leads me to think that the DPRK has some legitimate concerns here. And why is that? Well, let's just say that the DPRK, okay, that Korea as a whole, but the DPRK in particular, have an experience with imperialism, a direct one. This isn't some kind of story about the DPRK in the Republic of Korea in this kind of divided peninsula where the United States supports one side. This isn't some kind of benign conflict. No, this has a history, okay? This history is bloody and it's ruthless. And so before I get into how bloody it was through the air when the US invaded Korea in 1950, I want to show you some numbers about what US troops did early on in the Korean War. Very early, okay? And this is not bombing campaigns. This is through the US military's land campaign. All right. And I'm going to try to actually increase this. So this is, before I get into it, this is, this is a 1993 document from the DPRK. US imperialists started the Korean War. Okay. And it's written by these academics, Hong Jong-ho, Kang Sak-hui, and Pak Tai-ho. So it was published by the Foreign Publishing House in Pyongyang, Korea. And so I'm going to try to actually get back to the numbers because it's pretty far down. I believe it was page 204. So this chart shows, okay, so below here it says the U.S. aggressors killed these hundreds of thousands of innocent people by shooting, hanging, beating, and burying alive. And they resorted to the most horrible and brutal methods, killing people after dragging them through with their noses and ears run through wire, scooping out their eyeballs and cutting off nipples, skinning off their heads and bodies, cutting off their lips and tongues, dismembering their limbs. You get the picture, okay? Torture. And so this is during the occupation in Korea. This is not the bombing campaign. And this is just 1950, okay? So these are statistics of the murderous atrocities committed by U.S. imperialism in some areas of the northern half of the republic during its temporary occupation. And this is in 1950, okay? So look at these numbers. Pyongyang, 15,000 slaughtered, okay? Sinchon, 35,000 slaughtered, right? You can go Pyeongsang, 5,000, almost 6,000 slaughtered. We can go down the line, right? These are hundreds of thousands of people in these local areas of the northern half of the peninsula. I mean, this is a war crime. And so that alone shows you the brutality, right? The brutality of US imperialism and why the DPRK, after successfully staving off this invasion, might feel like they need a little bit of protection. Okay. And sorry, so I see some people saying trigger warning, please. I'm sorry. Yeah, trigger warning. This is heavy material. My bad, everyone. My bad. But I only reviewed the numbers. I didn't know they were actually going to get that deeply into it. So that's how awful, that's how brutal, how genocidal U.S. imperialism is, and why the DPRK feels it needs to have some heavy security, okay, a heavy defense against this happening again. And so I'm going to share now the last piece of history here before I get into the impact of the sanctions on the DPRK. It's important for you to have this short, brief, and I like to find some kind of brief sources for you all just so you get the picture, because there are entire books by Bruce Cummings, I would suggest. All of his work really on the history of Korea are important works. But here is a great short article. I wouldn't call it great, but I'll call it serviceable. Unknown to most Americans, the U.S. totally destroyed North Korea once before. So this was written in 2017. David McNeil out in Japan, Tokyo. He says, foreign tourists in North Korea are invariably steered to the victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum in Pyongyang, which documents the isolated nation's crucible years, the 1950 to 53 war that split the Korean peninsula in two. Rural school children dressed in military uniform, blah, blah, blah. So let's move on to the war. Okay, so here is Blaine Hardin, author and former Washington Post reporter. So he says he recently called a long, leisurely, and merciless. He recalled the atrocities as long, leisurely, and merciless, a U.S. bombing campaign. That's what he called it. Well over 500,000 tons of bombs dropped, napalm and chemical weapons deployed, which I talked about in my article, and cities leveled. Although the ferocity, he says, of the bombing was recognized as racist and unjustified anywhere in the world, says Hardin, for many Americans, it was just another conflict in a distant and poorly understood country, he concludes. Not for nothing, it is called the Forgotten War. The result was perhaps 3 million dead, and the museum recalls the first U.S. armistice in history signed without a victory. In 3 years of fighting, a single major city changed hands, Kaesong, which is now the last vestige of a once hopeful détente with the South. So Air Force General Curtis LeMay, head of the Strategic Command during the Korean War, estimated that the American campaign killed 20% of the entire population. We went over there and fought the war and eventually burned down every town in North Korea. So this continues, right? Douglas MacArthur's plan to win was a list of targets sent to the Pentagon requesting 34 atomic bombs to create a belt of radioactive cobalt across the neck of Manchuria so that there could be no land invasion of Korea from the north for at least 60 years. So nuclear war was declared. Really, that was what was hoped for. I mean, he didn't get what he wanted because of the resistance in Korea, but out of the wreckage of the conflict unresolved to this day, we have Kim Il-sung built isolated state, yada, yada, yada. And so that's just some of the facts, right? And then they talk about the amnesia, where it says 58% of Americans would support military action against North Korea if peaceful and diplomatic means fail. So they forget, right, how disgusting this war is. But that's just a little bit of a taste of how destructive the war is. Even U.S. officials from Curtis LeMay, right, they say that they leveled North Korea. They killed 20% of the population, razed entire cities. Douglas MacArthur wanted a nuclear winter in Korea. And so we have to understand that the DPRK has a lot of reasons to be concerned here. The DPRK has a history of losing millions of people, having chemical weapons deployed on them, which I covered in my article on the times that the US has used chemical weapons. We're talking about cholera, we're talking about anthrax, we're talking about bacterial agents that were released on the population to destroy crops, to destroy people's lives, to sicken people, to target the elderly, to target really a majority peasant population, to starve them, destroy their water systems. I mean, this was a brutal campaign. This was a campaign of total annihilation. In the United States has absolutely no right to lecture the DPRK on anything, given that history alone. But this history continues with the sanctions. The sanctions are brutal. Do not allow Janet Yellen or any of these other corporate capitalist imperialist hawks tell you that sanctions don't hurt people. So a study from Korea Now, Korea Peace Now, that I'm going to pull up, has just a brief analysis of, and so this is a study from Korea Peace Now. I'll just show you the title of it, The Human Cost and Gendered Impact of Sanctions on North Korea. And this was written by Korea Peace Now, a global movement of women mobilizing to end the Korean War. And they commissioned this report to assess the human cost of sanctions on North Korea, in particular North Korean and women in the DPRK. So let me just go back to the chart. I believe that was page 16 here. So this chart is preventable deaths attributable to delays in funding shortfalls due to the sanctions. And so these are estimated figures, but the estimated figures is that in this year alone, this 1 year, 2018, right, that we saw preventable deaths in the thousands due to these medical conditions and issues, right, that could have been prevented with supplies that the sanctions were preventing from the DPRK, that they were restricted from obtaining. So here you have severe acute malnutrition, 1,650 deaths, 343 deaths due to vitamin A deficiency, and the lack of emergency reproductive health kits. You had 1,272 deaths. So overall, with all of these conditions, you had about 3,698 deaths in that 1 year, showing that delays, actually, no, this is just preventable deaths overall, and then deaths due to delays even more. So it's over 4,535. So delays and then preventable deaths from not having the supplies, and then the delays in funding, delays in supplies, what deaths those cause. So this table just shows you how the DPRK has actually had a human cost. There's been a human cost to this. People don't necessarily believe it. On the one hand, by the reactionaries, going all the way from even the most so-called progressive liberals to the most reactionary hawks that you could find on the political right, they just don't see people in the DPRK as human, right? They don't see them as human. They see people in the DPRK as just brainwashed victims of a so-called authoritarian government that needs to be overthrown, the so-called hermit kingdom. Once it's overthrown, the people will be liberated, right? War will bring them peace. That's the narrative. And then you have, on the other hand, even people on the left who support the people of the DPRK. They may think that the DPRK socialist system, which is robust and has actually improved the quality of life for people in the DPRK quite immensely, that this means that they are kind of sanctions proof. Well, actually, their economy is not sanctions proof. And this is one of the reasons why the DPRK is trying to maintain a relationship with China, really strengthen that relationship, right? There was all kinds of, in 2020, there was the anniversary, right? The 70th anniversary of the war to aid the people of Korea against American aggression, the war against American aggression to aid Korea that China celebrated. The DPRK was very enthusiastic about that. These peoples have a relationship, a bond, an anti-imperialist bond. And so while China is sanctions proof because of its size, because of its ability to open up, because of so many things, it's made itself relatively sanctions proof. The DPRK is not. And this impact shows, this impact of US sanctions shows it. It shows the devastating human cost, that this war, this armistice that was supposedly signed, really has no teeth, because the teeth are really in these sanctions. The militarization is a danger, it's a threat, but these sanctions are already harming people's lives, killing people in the thousands, right? And it's a similar experience to Venezuela, which we know in a couple of years they lost 40,000 people from 2017 to 2019. And the impact of these sanctions elsewhere in the other 28 plus countries, it's the same. So we have to look at it this way, and we have to oppose these sanctions, and we have to stand in solidarity with the DPRK against these sanctions. That is what it means to be actually legitimately involved in the peace movement. So that's what I wanted to show you with the DPRK, right? I wanted to show you that history, just a brief review of the destruction that the US caused during the Korean War, the lecturing that it continues to give to the DPRK around its buildup of its own defense systems, the fact that the US still militarily provokes the DPRK through the militarization of the South of the Republic of Korea with tens of thousands of troops, hundreds, if not thousands, of weapons of mass destruction of their own right. And this attempt, right, this very racist attempt to paint the DPRK as this aggressor, this like inhuman hermit kingdom that's looking to destroy the world, is actually only facilitating more and more aggression, more and more war. And this is what the Biden administration is doing with its time in this moment of a legitimacy crisis, in this moment of crisis for itself. It is just escalating and fueling and continuing on with the agenda of imperialism. So, as I said, the default is that Biden will support and will continue to serve imperialism, because when you are trying to be neutral on a moving train, you are going to default to what is hegemonic, what is the motive force right now in the political situation in the United States, and that is militarism, that is empire, and that is this uh, general crisis of capitalism and imperialism, fueling more and more war, and the DPRK remains a target. So, lastly, right? Lastly, I want to get into, now that we've talked about the DPRK, the new sanctions that have been leveled upon them, the history and context that we need to know in a very brief time. We could talk about that forever. I'm hoping to get on, hopefully, a good guest about that. Now I want to get into something that happened today, which was Amazon, in the warehouse, the distribution center in Staten Island voted today positively, affirmatively for the Amazon labor union. So congratulations. That's an incredible development. I'm so happy to see that these monopolies, these huge corporations, these huge service industry corporations, this dominant trend in the imperialist system economically, that there is this push to unionize. We see it at Starbucks, now Amazon. There was that failure a little while ago within the last year or so. In Bessemer, I know they're continuing to try through the RSDSW. But this independent labor union in Staten Island has actually been able to win some real results. So in the election, they actually counted today. I think they had somewhere about 400 more votes positively than negatively. So in effect, they've won. They've won union recognition. However, and this is what I want to talk to you about before I get into the story about AOC and how she has handled herself and how the squad has handled themselves in this moment. I just want to say, and I hope, I really do want to talk to Chris Smalls. He seems like a great guy. So hopefully I can get him on the program at some point. But the union effort, any union organizing campaign. I've been part of unions as a member. My wife was an organizer for a while, so I've learned a lot from her. I actually did union semester program at CUNY as well. You know, organizers were teaching that course. We're teaching courses there. So I've learned a lot about labor organizing over the years. Been a shop steward many times, but I've never organized one on my own. But I'm married to someone who did it for like 7 years. So I have some base knowledge about this. And I've done a lot of research and study about labor law. And one of the things that the Amazon Labor Union is going to confront now that it has won formally recognition is that the NLRB, the Taft-Hartley Act, right? This was the Taft-Hartley Act. This was 1949. Was it? 1947. Sorry. Right after these huge gains, these millions of workers on strike, pushing for progressive policy, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed as a response. It was an anti-communist measure. It was a measure to purge the most radical elements of the labor movement into just obscurity. It was meant to destroy the radical tradition of organized labor during the industrial labor movement in the United States. And it succeeded in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it did so was it barred and banned a lot of the most militant actions that labor unions could participate in, from a general strike, right? The strike was actually limited now to only during the collective bargaining agreement periods. Solidarity strikes were barred, made illegal. Boycotts were made illegal, right? A lot of actions by unions that in labor workers that they could take to win power were actually made illegal. And then, of course, being a communist was literally made illegal to this day because of the Taft-Hartley Act. A lot of unions still adhere to this very outdated measure that people have to sign cards saying they're not a member of the Communist Party. So, nonetheless, one of the barriers that Taft-Hartley presented to the working class was the formation of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. This is basically a judicial system that Washington appoints that litigates between employers and workers. And it always favors employers. It always favors the bosses because it's literally appointed by the very forces that are controlled by the bosses, by employers, politicians, right? So Washington and it effectively has become an arbiter of labor unions. And what happens is that labor law allows employers to continue to appeal and appeal and delay and delay. So that's what's likely to happen here. I would really like to hear what the organizers are thinking from here on out about how this will play out, but it's almost a guarantee that Amazon will not forfeit and say, hey, we recognize these results. They're likely to continue to appeal it and try to bleed the workers dry, try to continue the anti-union campaign and move people to the anti-union stance as this is litigated by the NLRB, as there's appeals, injunctions put in by Amazon, hoping to really deflate the organizing efforts. And so I'm very curious about how this will play out because even though recognition has been formally won, there's still mechanisms that Amazon could use to make problems for the workers. And so it is my hope that the organizing continues and that the pressure is put on, right? It is most likely that even if a union is recognized at Amazon, that Amazon will not meet the demands through negotiation, right? There won't be some nice talk at the table with Amazon saying, okay, we'll give you wage increases, improvement of working conditions. I know that's a big one because Amazon workers literally die at these warehouses, right? They piss in bottles, they die of heart attacks because they're being overworked. Improving healthcare, all of that, vacation, all of these bread and butter. But it's likely that Amazon won't meet these conditions. And so during the collective bargaining period, you can strike. And so there will have to be a lot of organizing, probably around a strike. That would be huge. That would be monumental to see a strike at an Amazon employer, at an Amazon warehouse. And I hope we do see it. But of course, a lot of this is in the future, right? What will happen in the future. But right now, it is a huge deal that Amazon workers in any location have voted to recognize a union representation. Employers always say, oh, we don't want to negotiate with the third party. No, workers are the union. And this Amazon labor union drive shows it. It is Amazon workers organizing their own union, trying to drive it through with community power and support and solidarity. And so, really, tip of the hat to probably what is one of the most difficult places, if not the most difficult place, to try to organize a union, given Amazon's stature in this imperialist system, right? It is literally really in the vanguard of this imperialist system. It is the economic force which has tentacles everywhere from military intelligence, high tech, and of course, it has seeped into almost every area of economic life for working people. So it is a behemoth, and it is great that we're seeing this. So my solidarity and my hat goes to the Amazon workers, and I'm going to continue to follow the situation because I do want to definitely cover it and see it materialize into the best possible outcome. And so, yeah, the struggle continues. But I want to talk about something with regard to Amazon and the workers who are unionizing. So a lot of people know Chris Smalls, right? He's the leader of the Amazon Labor Union. He's been very vocal about the limitations of the Democratic Party, and including the progressives in the squad, etc. We saw Jordan Sheridan, who I said before, Respect His Journalism, has been doing a lot of great coverage on this. And as these votes were being tallied over the last day or so, we see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come out and say she supports this. And I'm going to pull up the Twitter thread about this because this is a great thread that kind of demonstrates why the Democratic Party isn't a friend of working people. And actually, it is a really dangerous opponent of working people, given that it attempts to pose as a friend and it attempts to bring working people, working class people, oppressed people into its graveyard of social movements. So here's the Twitter thread, AOC, right? This was yesterday. Muscles. Because look, they're winning. 15-18 yes, 11-54 no. I think the results even got better. So here's Crystal Ball, who says, here's the guy, and she means Chris Smalls, who I guess was on her program with Kyle Kalinske. Here's the guy who organized the union drive talking about how you left them high and dry. These are your constituents, and you couldn't be bothered to show up until they're on the cusp of victory. So actually, this was a story reported in January that the Amazon Labor Union in Staten Island had asked, right, in New York, had asked that AOC come and support them, and she said no, or at least she left them high and dry. So look at what AOC has to say here. AOC says that the warehouse isn't in my district, and maybe you should look at a map. I mean, this is just straight fire that she's trying to spit back at Crystal Ball. Look at a map before claiming that it's in my district. One scheduling conflict aside, I mean, she sounds actually super elitist here. I mean, if this were an in-person conversation, I don't think I would be able to have it with AOC if someone was talking to me like this, right? She's literally in some kind of Twitter personality mode, and it's disgusting. So one scheduling conflict aside, we have requested oversight, blah, blah, blah. We've done this. We've oversight, met with Amazon workers in Woodside, right? In Woodside and more. Hope you do due diligence next time. More due diligence. Oof. So Jordan comes in and he said, I was told by workers that your folks told them at last minute it was a security issue, not a scheduling conflict. So she's not even getting her own story right. Whether it's your district or not, you would think a New York congressperson would have tweeted support, particularly in the final weeks for one of the most important union drives. And then she says security was an issue as well. 2021 included high-level threats on my life. So here we go again. AOC and the squad, they're under threat, so they can't do anything, I guess, is the narrative. It limited what activities I was able to do, especially those outside. The combination of that, plus when we were able to get resources, time. Okay, I'm bored now. To secure them creates scheduling and logistics conflicts. So I'm actually Chris Smalls. I don't see it here, but Chris Smalls actually responded to this. If I can't find it, that's fine. But she didn't respond to Chris Smalls either, right? She didn't respond to him. She didn't give him the time of day. But think about that. Think about that attitude there, saying that there was a scheduling conflict, there were security issues. That's why I couldn't tweet out support. And this goes back all the way to force the vote. This goes back to Medicare for all. This goes back to the very reason the squad AOC was elected. It was to fight for positive, progressive, left political change. It was to fight for policies that are popular among wide ranges of the wide majority of the population, right? This was why they were elected. And when someone calls them to account, like even Crystal Ball or Jordan Sheridan did there, pretty basically, I mean, this wasn't some kind of militant pitchfork effort by these folks. These journalists were literally just saying, how about you listen to the leader of this union who's saying you actually didn't support them? How about you actually tweet out support, use your popularity for good, support these workers in a real legitimate way, in a material way? Why not? And AOC cannot help but say, no, I can't because I have security concerns. I can't go out because my life is threatened. I can't do it because, um, I have scheduling conflicts, right? All of this is just excuses. And this is what we have, right, for a so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party. We really just have excuses. And it isn't to say that AOC and the squad can on their own really push things very far inside of Congress and inside of a White House that is literally geared toward reproducing the capitalist and imperialist system, right? This neoliberal order. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they could be. This is theoretical. This is not the Marxist analysis. This is theoretical. This is the hypothetical. They could legitimately, right, make such a ruckus, make such a fuss, demand the impossible, as people like Pelosi would say that these ideas or policies are impossible, demand it, and have those who support them really be the agents of change who say, okay, well, at least the person we voted in is saying they're fighting for this. So now we will fight for it. We will make it so it is very difficult for the establishment to ignore these things, to not make them happen. But what has the squad done? Well, they haven't done that at all. They just continue to tweet out and say they support Medicare for all and they support student loan cancellation. And what would this mean for your family? But then they just go back to business and maybe they'll vote positively on some things and negatively on others. But it really doesn't make a material impact. It doesn't change the political situation. It really just maintains the status quo. And here you have AOC literally talking down to journalists who are not in positions of political power. They have some influence, I guess Crystal Ball a little bit more because she works for The Hill than Jordan Sheridan. Both of them have a modicum of influence within journalist circles and people who follow independent media, but they're not AOC. They're not people who have literally tens of millions of followers on social media. They're not people who have tens of millions of people who support them, who would listen to them if there was something that they could do to support the efforts of the squad to get things done. But that's not the point, because the Marxist analysis, right, the actual analysis of this situation is that they don't want to because they're not in a situation to want to, right? It's not about what their ideas are in their head. It's what the reality of the state and the party, right, the organ of the state that they serve, this Democratic Party, it's what its very nature is, right? Its very character. Everything that it is about forwarding the agenda of endless war and austerity. Even if it says, okay, we can absorb some of these so-called progressives in, we can allow them to win an election or two here and there, right? We'll allow that. We'll make it very difficult, but we'll allow it for some in some areas. That's fine, but they can come in and they can have their careers, but they're not going to shake things up. That's who really rules, right? It's those forces who dictate politics in that manner, right? It's the Pelosi's, it's the Schumers, and then it's their donors. It's the ruling class. That's who rules. The AOC and the squad, they're just along for the ride at this point, right? They rode the wave of progressive and leftist sentiment, of grassroots progressive and leftist sentiment, and they've exploited it for their gain, but they have no interest, and they've already shown it. They don't have any interest in moving the needle further, of even perhaps committing class suicide, to quote Amilcar Cabral, because class suicide would be, well, we're going to fight for our political principles and our program that got us elected to the point where it's actually going to nuke our political careers. And that may actually do a lot more for the political situation and the left in the United States than what they're doing now, which is just following the status quo, towing the line, trying to do virtue signaling like you saw in that tweet, right? Muscles, strong, working people. Yeah. But then, of course, there's the history that Crystal Ball and Jordan Sheridan brought up, which says, well, actually, you're not pulling your weight in helping the Amazon workers unionize. How much of a difference would it be financially in terms of resources? Because independent labor unions, they don't have an international union when they are willing to give support to more militant activities, but they don't have an international or national, more so, but it's called the international, is what the big unions are called. They don't have an international to support the local effort, right? What would it mean for AOC to come out and support for them, right? Actively. For over the last few weeks, she could have been tweeting, live tweeting, hey, look what's happening here. I'm not even there. Maybe I can't be there. But look what's happening. Look at the rallies. Look at what they're doing. Look what they're asking for. And you should support them. What would that mean? I think she has about 13 million followers, something like that on Twitter. Um, she has many more millions on Instagram and other places. What would it mean just for that alone? It probably would have helped the campaign enormously, but she didn't do it. Instead, she got into a Twitter argument with journalists who are outside of the corporate media sphere. She got into them in this like kind of smug, almost triggered way. And it's unfortunate in some ways, but it's revealing in others, right? It reveals to us the character of the Democratic Party. It's a corporate party, it's an imperialist party, it's a party of capital. Anyone who calls themselves progressives and who stays in that party is betraying anything that could be called progressive. You stay in that party, you are that party, you become the party, and that party ultimately continues on with its agenda because AOC and the squad, I mean, they're not even trying to challenge it, right? And it's even worse on foreign policy, right? I think AOC deleted a tweet opposing sanctions against Russia. You saw Bernie Sanders, the kind of leader of the pack of the squad, come out and literally demand sanctions on Russia during the military operation. You've had AOC and the squad support sanctions on places like Cambodia. You've had them fail to challenge real U.S. military efforts in Syria and other places, right? They're absolutely horrific. You have AOC going to her so-called Chinese constituents in Queens and saying, oh, yeah, no, I support Tibet, right? Like I support Tibet independence, literally peddling the Dalai Lama and the CIA's line on that and their war of interference that they waged in the 1950s, literally supporting that kind of monstrosity. I don't know if you remember AOC in 2019 signing on a letter with Ted Cruz for so-called democracy in Hong Kong. I mean, this was a complete and utter, I think, just example of how AOC is willing to drop her so-called rivalry with Ted Cruz, her disagreements with Ted Cruz in order to demonize and lambast China over what was an NED, National Endowment for Democracy, sponsored proxy war on China and Hong Kong, which China was able to stabilize and ultimately defeat. And so that's AOC, right? And so you see here, AOC continues on with the trend of talking progressive on the one hand, while actually walking the line and following the status quo on the other by essentially ignoring the Amazon Workers Union campaign on Staten Island up until today. And then when called out for it, doubles down and says, actually, I've been doing a lot and you need to do your due diligence and you need to stop questioning me because, as Jay-Z once said, right? This capitalist, black capitalist nightmare, Jay-Z. He said that to Harry Belafonte, right? This was early in the Obama period. He said to Harry Belafonte, legendary left-wing revolutionary Harry Belafonte, that his existence is charity. And that's how AOC and the squad believes of themselves. That's what they believe of themselves. That their existence in Congress, that their existence as the squad, as politicians, as Democrats who are talking maybe a little bit more of a left political line, that their existence is enough and that you should believe that existence to be charity. You should feel good about it and you should be silent when they do what AOC did here, which is to ultimately betray the principles that they supposedly espouse and honestly follow some of the principles that they actually espouse on the reactionary end, which is they're much more enthusiastic about sanctions on Cambodia, and AOC was very enthusiastic about the proxy war on China and Hong Kong than she was about the Amazon workers union organizing campaign. So that tells us all we need to know about the squad and why anyone who calls themselves a leftist, and I'm going to say this in my piece, this is the end of my piece, and you're getting the conclusion of it, needs to build independently of the Democratic Party. Similar to how the Amazon Labor Union is trying to build outside of the AFL-CIO union structure, which is very heavily tied to the Democratic Party and does have a lot of limitations, although one of the limitations it does not have is resources. So that's one thing I'm sure is a struggle for the Amazon Labor Union. But nonetheless, the political limitations are so incredible that they really do weaken the labor movement, right? Right now, there's only about 10% of US workers in a union. That's why wages are low. That's why workers have very little power. It's because there's a very little organization right now. And so similar to that effort to independently build a labor movement through the Amazon Labor Union, we also need in the broader mass movement an independent organization, right? Glenn Ford, before his death, called for this all the time in his articles. We need a social democratic organization, which is not anti-communist, not pro-imperialist, but a social democratic mass organization which can express the true interests of working people. And through that organization, we independently can challenge the Democratic Party, not just electorally, but really in the streets and in the communities that we live in. That's what we need. We don't need more AOCs or Ilhan Omars or Rashida Tlaibs or anyone else in the squad. No more Bernie Sanders, no Ro Khanna, right? Ro Khanna going out there saying that military weaponry is progressive, right? You can give military weapons to Ukraine, and that's correct because of what Russia would have done if they didn't have our weapons of peace, right? This is literally what Ro Khanna thinks. He told Brianna Joy Gray that he believes U.S. weapons to Ukraine is fueling peace. I mean, if that doesn't show his Silicon Valley connections, if that doesn't show how big tech is so connected to the military industrial complex, I don't know what does, because he's literally like, yeah, cool. Keep pumping military weaponry into Ukraine. That will help fuel and bolster this military budget. But yeah, I'm against war. I'm against that war in Yemen, kind of, right? It's not really a threat for me to be opposed to that war because no one else supports my efforts to reduce that war. And so I'm not even going to give him credit for that, because one of the things that Bruce Dixon taught me, the late Bruce Dixon died in 2019, organizer, right? He was an incredible organizer, managing editor, Black Agenda Report. One of the things he taught me was that you don't get credit for doing the bare minimum in times when it's not a threat. So he would always talk about how, right, when the Democrats had majorities, like they did in 2009, for example, and Barack Obama, what did he do? He gave the middle finger to those who wanted universal health care and who wanted the Employee Free Choice Act, which would have made campaigns like the Amazon Labor Union a lot more easy to organize because it would have legalized card check and made it really mandatory for employers to respect. Right now, union campaigns really need like 75% of workers to sign a union card to avoid elections. But even then, it's likely, because the employer has the right, it's likely that the employer is going to force an election and then conduct an anti-union campaign, maybe even hire one of these anti-union labor law companies like Jones Day, right, to really diffuse and destroy the union campaign. And the Employee Free Choice Act would have prevented that legally, would have provided an institutional mechanism where that would be now illegal. But what did Obama do? He said middle finger to those things and everything else, honestly, right? And he said too big to fail, bailouts, and he completely ignored the constituents, right? Because the Democrats had a majority, and at that time, right, there was actually a possibility for those laws to be passed. And so Obama, being the imperialist that he was, being the servant of capital that he was, he did everything in his power to diffuse the left, neutralize the left, and allow for all kinds of excuses to be put forth why things could not happen, why those things could not happen. But it's times like in 2012 and onward, during the Obama period, or when the Republicans had a majority, in Congress, 2012 onward into 2018, right? That 6-year period. When the Republicans have a majority, then it's, oh no, the Republicans are the problem now. They're really stifling us. We can't do anything, right? That's when it becomes easy to say, oh yeah, I'm against the war on Yemen, right? Because that's what Ro Khanna has done. Not to say that I don't think uh, it's significant, but we have to understand through politics, it's pretty easy to fight for something when you are in a vast minority and when literally you don't have a shot of getting things done just by the number of votes. But whenever Democrats do, and they have had this possibility over the last several years, when you have even a slight majority, the Democrats don't even want to use it. They won't even use Kamala Harris's vote, which is the deciding vote. They don't want to use it because, oh, look, now there's the rotating villains of Manchin, Sinema. They're not cooperating, and now they're the scapegoats. When in fact, the Democratic Party is really doing it to itself because the Democratic Party, the DNC, they want to continue serving Wall Street and the military industrial complex. And it looks like the squad, from what we've seen since 2018, I was calling this out on Anya Parampil when she was the host of In Question. I was talking about this well before most people were talking about this. They were always on this trajectory. And I knew just from the Obama experience, just from what I saw with people, working people, Black people in my community, progressives everywhere. I saw what they were doing. They were really huddling under the Democratic Party's big tent. They weren't willing to challenge it. There was still a lot of this, oh, but the Republicans are more evil, so we got to vote for the lesser evil. So there was a lot of room for the squad to continue this trend of absorbing and really ingratiating themselves into the status quo. And that's what they've done. And they showed their colors once again with Amazon. So, with this Amazon labor union campaign, we have only been, I guess, vindicated in the sense that we do need an independent political force organization. We need more of an independent political movement away from the Democratic Party, one that is not detached to the Democratic Party. That's what we need. And that's what AOC's stunt, that's what her, I don't know, very amateurish kind of political stumble with Crystal Ball and Jordan Sheridan reveals. That's what it reveals. It reveals the need to be independent and separate from the Democrats. We need an independent political force. We need one that's not anti-communist. We need one that's not pro-imperialist. We need to have one that debates this idea of socialism. We need to build a broad force, a broad, united front that actually adheres to principles, whether you agree with them or not. And I think that's one of the problems we have on the left is that we do have a lot of anti-communism and a lot of pro-imperialist sentiment. We do have a lot of racism. We do have a lot of these problems within the left that creates issues, a lot of individualism, a lot of disorganization, a lot of confusion, a lot of clout chasing, a lot of this nonsense that prevents us from working together, even in the media sphere, but it's everywhere. It's in the organizing as well. And so we need to continue to learn lessons from what the Amazon workers are doing in Staten Island, what working people are doing everywhere right now to fight back. And so, again, salute to the Amazon workers. Thank you for not only building what I think is one of the most important campaigns that working class people can pay attention to and hopefully emulate, but also for exposing once again the true character of the capitalist state, no matter how progressive certain forces within it, like the squad, claim themselves to be and claim that state to be and claim that state to be capable of, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what AOC is saying, what the squad is saying is that they can make the state better. They can reform it. They can make it serve you. They can make it serve you again, right? They're not trying to tell you that actually this system controlled by oligarchs, this government controlled by oligarchs and capitalists and imperialists, that they will never let you have what you need. They will never let you live in a society where you have your needs met, as long as that means that it affects their profits. They're not trying to help build up confidence, build up people's skills and capacities to be able to not just understand that, but to act upon it. They're not doing that. That's the work of a revolutionary. They're not doing that work. They're doing the work of career building, of maintaining the status quo, and of reproducing the dominance of the Democratic Party over the American left. We need to be opposed to that every step of the way, all along the way, as we continue on in this struggle. That really does conclude my stories, right? I'm getting to 8:20. It is getting late. I've been on for about an hour and a half. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I'm just going to chat for a little bit, close things out over the next 15 minutes or so. While you're here, look below at this comment. I've kept it up during this stream. That's how you can support this work: liking, sharing the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell, and of course, the best way to support my work on this channel, as well as my writings and all of the activity that I participate in, Friends of Socialist China, co-editor, and other works. You can support all of that on Patreon. The link is there, links in the description. And so please do support me if you are able. And thank you so much, because it has really been helpful. I've really been able to increase the volume of my work and the level of my work. With that said, there are a lot of tasks ahead for us, right? Some of these questions that I think about, like the DPRK, we need to continue to have real fruitful discussions and analysis about this. So even just doing this stream today really joggled my mind to say, okay, we need to have real revolutionary analysis about this. There's some things I need to get on. I'm going to be smeared on the Daily Beast, and I don't know when that article is going to come out. Maybe it already is out. I just haven't seen it yet. But somebody tried to interview me. It didn't work out in terms of both timing and honestly the approach of this person, this so-called journalist at the Daily Beast, was incredibly disrespectful. And I just knew that if he were to waste my time on the phone like he did over email, that I probably would have said things that I would have regret, or at least that could have made it into the paper. So I didn't do it over the phone. Then he sent me a 7, he, they, them. I want to be respectful to the trans community, so I'm not going to assume pronouns here. But this journalist, they, get this, they sent me like 15 questions, 20, actually more than that. And I'm going to expose all of this once the article is written. It was ridiculous. Anti-communist. It sounded like a CIA interrogation. And so I didn't even answer it because honestly, it wasn't worth my time. I didn't think anything that I would have said would have legitimately made it into the article anyway. And so I can't wait for the article to come out because I'm going to cover it and you'll see what happens. But, my friend and colleague out in CGTN, out in Beijing, Jingjing Li, was just smeared in the Associated Press. So we're actually in talks about how to respond to that. And we'll maybe do something collaborative together. I want to get together the anti-Asian racism stream I did last year around this time with Amanda Yi and Xiang Yu and Carl Za. I think that would be a great thing to do. I want to get together the state-affiliated media panel with Lee Camp and Richard Medhurst and Jingjing Li because of all that has happened. I mean, there's so much to do, but I'm also burnt out, guys. I am burnt out. There's so much to do. I'm trying to get these things together, but it's hard to do. Really, it's hard to get it all together sometimes. So I'm pretty burnt out. So expect a vacation from me sometime in the second week of this month, where I just won't be doing anything. I feel like I need that at least once a year. I try to do that a couple times a year. But even when I'm taking breaks from like 9 to 5 work, I'm generally still doing this work. So at least once a year I try, or more, I try to take real breaks. And lo and behold, I'm one of those people that says like, yeah, we need to take breaks. We need to really take care of ourselves. And it's usually those giving the advice that need to take the advice. And that's definitely a self-criticism for me. So I have a lot of things on the horizon, but also, it may take some time, but I'm trying to do these streams regularly still, even if it's just me. So, I try to interact and have guests. I had Ken Hammond on a few days ago. That was a great conversation. This dude is smart. If you think I'm smart about like history and politics, he is an encyclopedic mind. So, that was a great stream. But I'm going to continue to try to have guests, but usually it's going to be just me as I, continue to boost the algorithm here and get this channel uh, more content, and then of course make the transition to these other outlets. Right, I'm on the Call-in app now because they are trying to facilitate this transition as well for podcasting, and so I'm doing that weekly, and I'll be doing that Sunday. So make sure 11:30 a.m. Sunday you are available to listen to that podcast. Just go to the app and download it. Cold War Brew. I'm on every Sunday. And yeah, so Odyssey, maybe Rumble. I'm thinking about it. I know it's taking some time. I know some of you are probably dissatisfied with that, but things take some time, especially when I'm writing columns and stuff. I'm trying to really just make it work. And so one step at a time, guys, and you will definitely see the transition happen. So Franny French said, "What's Cold War Brew?" I'm gonna get some questions. So what is Call-in? It's an app, so it's a phone app. Um, so Big Teal said maybe you need to develop and organize and divide the labor. Yeah. I think develop an org. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Thank you so much, Franny, for the kind words. The stream was great. I appreciate that. I do need, to divide the labor. That it's so funny. Like I'm a I work very well collectively, but I'm also someone who likes control too. So it's like a balance. It's always a balancing act for me. But it's also tough when you need to raise revenue to like pay people, right? And because I don't like yeah, we should all be comradely and volunteering our time, but I know the realistic situation that people are in, and so it's tough when money gets involved because it makes things hard. That's why I promote this work. That's what I'm trying to build up to, actually. So Callin is an app that you can download on Android and Apple services. Download it. Look up my show, Cold War Brew. Subscribe to it. Follow me there on my individual profile. I'm doing this show 11:30 a.m. Eastern time every Sunday. There's some Sundays I won't be able to do it, but I'll try to do it another time. But yeah. So no, it's not really Spotify, it's its own app. I do manage a Spotify, by the way, Chronicles of Hai Fong. I just updated it. I had a comrade really nicely do that for me. So I'm just putting that in there, actually. If you want to listen to some of these things on Spotify, I put it in the chat because all of my streams and conversations and work that I'm doing is up there now. It wasn't updated for a while. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm wrapping up here, but I I do. Somebody said control. We love authoritarian, Danny. Yeah, no, I mean, I do have. Look, I'm someone who believes that we all need help, but I also do believe in leadership, and so if that's authoritarianism. That's authoritarianism. But yeah, like this is something I've taken leadership over myself, and so I've tried, right, to delegate, and this has happened many times, trying to do independent initiatives, and when money gets involved, it's tough. I mean, it's all just tough. There's a lot of contradictions in all the things that we do. So surely, yes, I am working with some folks now to try to get some more help, but it'll take some time. So Big Teal, I want to see you on my call-in podcast. It's fun though. It's actually fun. We get to talk like one-on-one. Yeah, definitely come through. Well, one-on-one, but you can bring in multiple people, but I keep it to one person at a time because I'm always worried that there's going to be one of those people who are just so disruptive. And then so one person at a time, we chat, you can ask questions, comments, we go back and forth. It's cool. It's cool. So if there's any other questions, I don't know. I don't see any. I know there were some super chats though. I'm still in this phase with the monetization of this channel where it's like they got to send me some kind of pin, YouTube, and it's really ridiculous. I kid you not. YouTube makes you like get something in the mail. They mail you something, and then you have to give them the pin that they mail you for 3 weeks later, and then you'll get your money that you all are giving to me. So if you're super chatting me, I'm so sorry, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to collect that money after even YouTube gets its cut. So what I would say to anyone who can hear this, that if you want to support me, honestly, a monthly donation through Patreon goes much farther because I do these streams. I've been doing them at least once a week. So that's like 4 streams. You donate $5 a month. You're literally giving me like a super chat of $1 or 2 per time if you would do that anyway. And that's just, I feel like that's just better. In my opinion, that's how I look at it. I'm not going to judge. I love and appreciate all your support. But in terms of how I look at this, given that YouTube is not going to release these funds for a while, I should have said this maybe in the beginning, but at the end of the day, yeah. So just wanted to put that out there. So yeah, I see some super chats, but I don't see any real questions with the super chats. No, nope, nope. Thank you so much anyway for them. Voltaire, appreciate that. Lee, appreciate that. I don't see anyone else. Let me see. A lot of chats today. Thanks so much for what was a productive stream. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to see. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Chun, so much for that super chat. I don't see any questions with the super chats, though. Not that I say like the super chats are the questions. When they release the funds, maybe I'll make that something I do, but not yet because I don't know what's going to happen with these funds. I don't know how much trouble I'm going to have to go through. I know some people have a lot of trouble. Some people have no trouble. It is what it is. So I'm gonna make clips of this show, of course. What I do, I still leave up the stream. I'm not like rejecting it. So here's Bigfoot. Hello, Bigfoot. What's the name of an alternative platform you use? I can't stand Patreon. Sorry. Okay, I hope you're still here. So I also use Substack. Subscribe to my Substack annually. I think that's the best way to go if you hate Patreon. A lot of people hate Patreon. Personally, I hate Patreon too. Patreon, these platform fees. Literally, I'll tell you one thing. If you want to hear me vent about Patreon, they've iced me out, right? They conned me. I was so new to it. They conned me into this like automatic charge. So people who subscribe are automatically charged for that month. But they conned me out of like content driven payments, right? So people can in some ways pay by post, right? And that might be easier for some people or just better because it helps them maybe spread it out. Um, or maybe they just like it better or annual. They iced me out of annual subscriptions. Like on Substack, you can do an annual subscription, which I would encourage if that's what you like, because hey, you can pay $70 or whatever for the year, and that averages out to $5 per month. But kind of like the reverse of when the boss gives you a bonus instead of a raise, right? The boss is thinking, okay, the bonus is a one-time cost. Spread that out over the months, the 12 months of the year, and actually it's much smaller than like a 3 to 5% raise, right? So similar here, said one if you prefer one-time payments because that actually will be beneficial for you financially, then Substack is the way to go. And you can find that in the description. Bigfoot, anyone else, you can find that in the description. And I post on Substack quite often. I post my articles there. I post updates, announcements, live streams. So do subscribe there for free anyway, because it's just a good way to know what I'm doing if you can't get onto Patreon. So that's what I would say. You can also go Cash App, D Haifong. You can find that, I believe, on my Twitter. Yeah. But I prefer Substack, honestly. So I had a pretty big. Okay, so Franny, thanks so much for the super sticker. I don't know how I get that on the screen. I don't think I can, but maybe I could go back. So if there's anything else here, I will try to note it. Thanks so much for being on. I see people kind of signing off, and that's my cue too to go eat some dinner and kind of end my night. So, start my Friday night. All right. Let's see. I guess there's someone in the chat. I didn't really see it. So maybe there's someone in the chat acting up. No real other questions. I know some people ask questions and I don't answer them. So I'm sorry about that. Doesn't always happen. But I'm always, I've opened DMs, I believe. And if I don't, you can always tag me and then yeah. Then somebody said something about Nathan Rich here. I thought he had stopped. I missed it actually. Because I know he stopped doing videos, I believe, right, guys? That's really sad. Or at least that's what I thought I heard. I listened to a few minutes of his last video. A lot of people are doing that. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes people do it to boost the algorithm. And sorry, I tried it once. It actually worked to a degree. Didn't work enough, though. I'm not going to do that very often, but I try. I try sometimes. Sometimes you got to do it. Boost the algorithm. You know what I'm saying? It's the game that it's fucking capitalists make you play. So, I'm not gonna keep blathering on. So for any French, I like this comment. I'm a fan of Danny's bookcase industrial complex with the nice lights. That's a funny comment. That's a funny comment. Yeah, yeah. I got this nice bookcase up here. Yeah, my wife, man, she's really good at picking up stuff. Somebody asked if that's Vegeta. That is Vegeta. I am a Vegeta stan. So if that boosts my credibility with anybody, I love Vegeta. He's my favorite anime character that I can think of right now. But yeah, no, he is one of my favorites. I loved what they did with him in the Super series. I loved his development over the course of the entire Dragon Ball kind of saga, all of the sagas. Right? I think that I love the Broly movie, his role in that. Although I do hope that they do not cut his edge because I think his edge and his, he's just like like honestly, I understand why people of color, especially oppressed people, black people in particular, but all people who follow anime, majorities of which in the United States do happen to be people of color, at least disproportionately. I won't say majorities in total number because white people just tend to be the biggest population. But me growing up, I know that all my friends who loved anime were people of color, and I know still to that day, all my friends to this day, they're all people of color who love anime. There have been articles written about this. It's a real thing, and I think Vegeta, his anger, his righteousness, his willingness to do what's correct, even when all of the his upbringing, his where he comes from, his origins, right? I think that he kind of embodies this like resilience in this struggle that people relate to, especially oppressed people relate to a lot more than like a Goku who kind of like has it easy, right? He's like endowed with this power, he just has to tap into it. And he just constantly beats Vegeta power wise, and it seems like he doesn't even try as hard, right? And so I think Vegeta's story is great. So yes, I'm a Vegeta stan. That is Vegeta. If that boosts my credibility with anybody, I hope so because I know a lot of people love Vegeta. So, so I don't know if there's any other questions. If that was funny, I like those comments. Honestly, I really like those. American population isn't too big to fail. I'm not really sure what you're referring to, but if that's a rhetorical question, okay, I think it is capable of failing. I think right now, I don't look at it in those terms though, because it's a class struggle. So it really is about how we get our class to fight. Um, but yeah, no, in the general sense, yeah, you could say that these are tough, tough times. Um, so yeah, I don't know what they're haters. I don't see no haters. All right. So thanks everyone for coming along. This was great. Please do, continue to like the stream, continue to share it, subscribe, all that good stuff. Of course, subscribe to the channel. Someone said, Big Teal said mail. Yeah, YouTube mails. I kid you not. They take your information. They say, we're going to mail you the pin. I'm like, what the hell? Uh, Buy me a coffee. Yeah, no, that's instant payment. That's good. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I've been thinking about that. It's just like there's so many things, right? It's like juggling like 20 bank accounts. It's ridiculous. I can't stand it. But you know, that's the reality of our existence. That's how we're kind of relegated to, yeah, to operate independently. Oof, I just looked at my Patreon, guys. Ouch. It's just ridiculous how, yeah. So, anyway, um, I don't see anything else. Thanks, Franny, for all the support. Kofi, have not. I think that's what someone said, right? Buy me a coffee. Yeah, I'm gonna look into that. I have Venmo, PayPal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me just put that in here. If you're still on here, right? I believe my PayPal is Danny H 2020 plus PayPal, and then my Cash App is the High Fong. I try to put that in things, but yeah. So Venmo, Danny H 2020 at Danny H 2020, or my PayPal, or oh, my PayPal. Sorry, my Cash App is D High Fong. I do have a PayPal too. I can put that link in the chat. Uh, I think, or maybe not. I don't know if I really want to. Um, but yeah, I'm on PayPal as well. Like that's that's. I don't like PayPal. All these companies take so much. Really appreciate that you all want to support in whatever way you can. I gotta say that these companies take so much. I hate it. We need our own funding structures somehow. That's why we need dues paying organizations. So just logging in because I want to copy I want to share the link. Where can I do that? Oh my gosh. It's I have a PayPal.me. I need to share this. Um Oh no. All right. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna get into this right now. But I will put it on before I leave here. I'll say bye, and then I'll put it in the chat. So, uh, I see some people want to interview me. I'm so sorry for anyone who's had a long delay with interviews. I've done like very sporadic interviews because it's been very hard to schedule time. So I'm so sorry. I'm spread kind of thin. I do want to interview with all folks. I do want to have these conversations with all folks. But thank you so much for the patience because it may take some patience with me right now. All right. Um, yeah. So, what's for dinner? My wife and I made this pineapple fried rice or something like that. Yeah, we made that. So it's really good. And pineapple can be iffy in fried rice, but nah, this is legit. This is legit stuff. It actually works. So Franny said, glad you're going to do some self care. Yes, yes, yes. That's what I'm going to do. All right. So Nathan Rich said he was gonna stop doing videos. Man, that's sad. I mean, that's just how the level of burnout. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. So I feel Nathan on this. But I will say that I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I'm not gonna stop making videos altogether. I do think that this channel is growing enough where it's worth it. I do think getting on these other platforms will have benefits. I am disappointed in how now that I have built a following to a degree, kind of can put myself out alongside some of these bigger names, right? Bigger names, and seeing how they kind of react to, I don't know, growth and success. It's like a lot of competition and cloud chasing. I'm not really about that. So I've been disappointed in how hard it is to collaborate, right? How hard it is to communicate and collaborate. And I get it. We're all busy. We all have issues. We all have things we got to do. A lot of people, this is like their job. So I get it. But I can count on my hand the number of people I know who I can kind of like rely on as like reliable people to collaborate with, to do like this I try to do equal collaboration. So I'm like, hey, mine on yours, yours on mine. Hey, let's do some joint projects. But I've been a little bit disappointed about that. So it can't be burnout inducing because I don't want to do this just on my own. This is not supposed to be just a channel where I'm just talking. I want to collaborate. I want to see I want to make this a space for people, but I know that if I'm gonna write as well, that it's gonna be somewhat limited, more limited than someone who does this 100%. Because I'm not gonna stop my columns. Mm-mm. I haven't gotten to that point, so I'm gonna keep doing it. So yeah, big deal, Vegeta. All power to Vegeta all the way. I want him to surpass Goku so bad. Vegeta and Piccolo. Yeah, Piccolo. Piccolo grows. I have with Piccolo. I have a love hate relationship because the writers do his character dirty a little bit. They make him so compelling early on, then they fade him out. They did the same thing to Gohan. What they did to Gohan was dirty. Cell Saga. He has this brilliant heroic moment, and the rest of the way he's like this irrelevant kind of like, what do you call it, a liability. The Boo Saga onward, ugh, man, that was rough. I know they're trying to reverse that, but Seb says next channel, is my channel over emotional and it's just a video talking about news? Yeah, no, I've thought about doing that. I know they can penalize you for that, but I might do that. Somebody said I'm an anime nerd, a little bit. I'm not as bad as people I know, but I'm a little bit. I'm a little bit. A little bit. I get sad when I fall out. Like I get sad when I fall out of like habits like I, I'm a human, so I fall out of things like study. So I study pretty hard, like theory, history. Then I kind of it can fall out, right? For responsibilities. I got the dog over here. I got, I'm married. I've got commitments to people, and then I've got this work, right? I'm trying to get out this writing and this channel. And then it's like, oh shit, some of these things I get sad about. And I do get sad sometimes that my anime nerd cannot be satisfied. So all the time, right? I kind of fall out. So anyway, yeah, I see a lot of people conversing. Thanks so much. Uh Naruto is the more socialist. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree. Naruto has pretty okay class analysis, I would say. It's a little bit too much on the feudal front. Um, yeah, so Seb says link them all. Yeah, no, you're right. I should do that every stream. I generally just put the Patreon and the Substack, but yeah, I should do, the PayPal and the PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. I should all put it on there. You're right. You're right. You're right. Good suggestion. I will definitely take that to heart. So, anyway, just want to know what payment method gives you the most, says Liang. Jews? I don't, I hate that I can't speak another language. But the payment method gives me the most. That's interesting. I'm not even sure about that. I would say that I think cumulatively, Patreon, just given where I'm at with Patreon, I'm like several $100s away from my goal on Patreon per month. So that gives me the most right now in terms of total monthly. So I would say please subscribe there if you can. In terms of the percentage they take out, I think it's on the higher end. So Substack is a great alternative. I feel like Substack is a little more generous, a little bit less of this fee. I think they do have like they have one fee, but I don't think they do take a cut for profit, but it's not, I don't feel it as much, certainly. And they send their payments differently in smaller amounts, so you do keep a bit more. It's not as centralized. While Patreon, right? It's kind of like the tax model. The more money you get, the more they're taking. While Substack, they always send you smaller payments from subscribers. So there's, and then for the PayPal, I feel like PayPal is one of the worst. They take a big percentage just right off the bat. So you give me $5 on PayPal and I'm getting like 4 or something. It's really bad. PayPal is pretty bad. Venmo, because I don't use for business, I get it all. So I take all from Venmo. Danny H 2020, get it all. But I know it's hard to remember Venmo. And then Cash App, D Fong is the same. So those two probably give the most in the one-time payments. But yeah, where am I with Patreon? Because it's just more streamlined and easier. Everyone hates it. I know I hate it, but it's a little more streamlined, a little easier to organize. And so that's why I suggest it. But thanks so much for that question. Dues paying orders with accommodations. Hell yeah. We know both for disabilities, etc. All right, I'm hitting the 2 hour mark, and I do gotta go. So you guys are really lovely. Salute to all of you. All power to the people, and I'll be back on again soon. So take good care, everyone. Someone asked if I take Dogecoin. I do have a Bitcoin. Message me, hit me up on Twitter somewhere, right? At me, whatever. We can talk about that. Anyway, peace out, everyone, and I'll see you again very soon. All right, bye bye. Salute.